Bonsoir les amis. Bonsoir, this is Llyane Stanfield and you can find me at ParisianFrench.com. Today I would like to give you the answer, to elaborate a little more on the answer to this question that is in the description of the video. At what point can you say that you started to become good in French? And I'm going to expand a little bit the question. So I got this question in Duolingo Facebook group for French, and Habib asked me this: at what point do you think a person can say they started to become good in French? Is it good to be able to convey an understandable idea regardless of the grammar? And what are the most used verb tenses in the French language that a foreigner should know and conjugate correctly? Thank you for your time. So I think that these questions are amazing for everybody, and I gave him an answer in writing, but I would like to expand here in the group because it's so important for the way that you set yourself up for learning. So what is your expectation, pretty much? And it's so important. Your expectation is so important in your results, right? So in order for someone to say that they started to be good in French, I think this is very subjective. What is your goal? It's really based on your goal. So is it good enough for you to be, for instance, to be able to just find your way in Paris, have shelter and food, and that would be good enough? It's good enough for you to be able to make conversation at different levels with no matter who you're talking with, a native French-speaking person, when you go and travel. That's another level. Is it good enough if you want to prepare to study something in Sorbonne in French, right? That is yet another level. So good in French is so subjective for everybody. And I would like to know, I would like you to write in the comments. I would like to know, because I really, really want to know you better. And what is your good enough? What is your the level that you would be really happy with? 1 second, I'm just turn off my Wi-Fi from the computer. So and so that would be a point to start from, the conversation, as well as your own expectation. Because if you're aiming for the stars, you're gonna get on the moon, right? So typically, if you're aiming for more, you're gonna get there. Sometimes more than that, if you're open for it, sometimes less than that. And so it's so important to identify for yourself what is good for you. And in my opinion, regardless of level, actually, good is when you become, when you speak clearly in conversation. So when your message that you convey is understood, that you speak to someone, as in you can open a conversation, and then they understand you, and they get back, they answer to you, you understand them, and then you continue, sustain the conversation. To me, that is what is called good in French. Again, if your goal is to apply to go to school in Sorbonne in French, then this is not good enough. You have to go further than this. It is so much more intense. So on one end, yeah, this would be okay, but if you think about it, the level of the vocabulary and grammar, but vocabulary is much higher if you go into a higher level of education. I would say that vocabulary would probably be your first concern if you'd go to a higher level. Not so much, well, grammar too, but the vocabulary by far is going to be the one that may stump you if you go to a higher level. So without a large vocabulary, because the question here was, is it enough to speak correctly even if we make some mistakes? Does that matter? It does. So you need to know, but you don't have to be sophisticated, ultra sophisticated in your grammar or vocabulary to be good, like for the general public. I'm not considering here people who, for instance, have businesses, and a lot of you are. And so if, for instance, for you, if you would like to make a pitch in French or to negotiate a contract, that asks for a higher level of French. Again, vocabulary would be the first one that would stump you. With grammar, not so much, just the form of the verbs, which again, to me, that is also words. That's vocabulary. It's not the rules of how you use it, because you can still understand and you can make your own speech. You can create it based on your rules, right? So based on your level. So it doesn't have to be that high of a level, and so you can still communicate really well in business. And but it's what's important is the phrase construction. So whatever level of grammar that you get to, phrase construction, which includes grammar, but the way that you create the sentence, that is what's the most important. The agreements, so important, genders, and that is easy, just taking some time and effort to assimilate those words with gender, right? As I said yesterday in the video, I think, the genders can be just memorized and assimilated. So there are words that contain gender. The words contain the gender. When we learn them, we have to memorize them as such. And problem is that most people don't. So most people learn the words as in table is table, livre is book. In fact, le livre is the book and la livre is the pounds. If you say livre, you're going to confuse everybody. If you say les livres in a sentence, the people are going to pick up depending on the context. And so you may say books, you may say pounds. So the gender, that's the only way to actually manage genders. So, but gender is so important because it changes through agreements. It changes the way the phrase works. What do I hear? What you actually pronounce, and the way you convey the message, and that's important. Verb conjugation. If you stop wherever you stop, and I'm going to go because the question also includes what are the tenses of the verbs, and that's important. And so wherever you stop, whatever level you stop to, do it correctly. So it is so important not to speak. That's why I ask you, please, make sure that you work on the correctness of the phrase. Make it much simpler so you can manage it and eventually assimilate it, because if you make like a huge story, wherever I'm correcting. So I create it not because I see you guys want to speak with each other, and I'm perfectly fine with that. So, but let's have it in a specific dedicated space where you speak back and forth with the French that you have and play around with it with mistakes. That's fine, but you know that space is with mistakes allowed, so that you actually get in touch with each other and play a little with the language. And then when we are having these posts where I am correcting, make the sentences short with simple words and simple grammar, as in phrase construction is simple, you know it, you understand it, you apply it. So I do not think I never considered that poor grammar is acceptable. But you don't need as much vocabulary and verbs as you think you do. So toning down a little, the need for new words and new verbs and new tenses, and so reducing those, but staying correct on the communication, and the smaller the communication, the easier to manage, and stay within the limits that you know. If you don't, that's fine. I'm telling you, just say, I don't know. Cool, I'll tell you, okay? Because everybody's at different levels. But if you try guessing, and I encourage that very much. And so if you guess 3 times, in my experience, my students are finding their own answers in the 3rd try. So do start guessing. That's why I'm asking you, what do you think is here? How can you guess what correction can be here? It's a game. I mean, don't be so hard on yourself. Nobody's dying in here. It's just a game. But let's do it such that eventually the game serves the purpose of the brain picking up on that pattern, and eventually you're going to get a pattern that you won't forget. And that's pretty much what I'm looking for here. So the answer is stay with the small vocabulary, a small number of tenses, and verb conjugation, keep it reduced, but stay correct in the phrase construction. Keep the sentences short so that you can manage that and make it as much as correct as possible. In the second question was, what are the tenses that a foreigner should know to conjugate? So needless to say, you should know all the tenses eventually. So the question wasn't for a beginner, the question was a foreigner. But what I want to give you is the list of tenses that you should eventually know, but in chronological order, meaning the first tense that you need to know, and then the second, and then the third, and so on. Okay, so I have 15 tenses. We are so many levels here, but I do want to give you in order, okay? The technique that works is stay with the first tense until you're perfectly comfortable with it. You don't have to know a ton of verbs to be comfortable with it. You don't. You just have to make conversation enough that it just comes eventually. Then you start with the second tense and then stay with the second tense for a little bit. And you can't speak with only one tense really, but stay with it for a little bit and mix it up with the first one, and then stay with the first 2 tenses until there's comfort there. There's no second guessing. That's important. And then introduce your third tense and do the same. Mix it up until you're comfortable with the 3 tenses. I can't remember who, but someone said that in this group that they're uncomfortable with using multiple tenses. Of course, because in every school and course, it's like introduced like that and mixed, and then you have to all of a sudden manage everything. You have to introduce little by little. This is how I'm doing an intensive program. So, and that's the reason why it works, because the intensive program is supposed to work fast. So you get from 0 to advanced in 5 months. And so this is the way that we add from lesson to lesson. So, and so on, okay? Now, you do have to give yourself time. If any of you are against a timeline, if you get like an exam, or you're in school, or if you have a client meeting that you have to attend and you really have to be really confident in your French by a certain date, or if you have a trip to Paris or France or a francophone country that you have to deal with for your business with French, please let me know, PM me, and and we'll deal with this like in an ultra intensive way, which I do too, and I love doing that because it gets results really nicely. Okay, so this is the list of the tenses. The first will be présent indicatif. The second will be passé composé. So I know a lot of you here that at this point will kind of be overwhelmed, okay? So write them down and pick the tenses that the first, okay? And so if the second one is way too much for you already, write it, because it's good to be challenged. It cannot be boring, but it cannot be overwhelming, right? So I'm gonna keep you at the edge of your ability. That's where learning works. It has to be fun too, right? So stop wherever it's like, oh, this is challenging, but I can reach there. Okay, don't make it overwhelming because we're getting problems here. So the first, présent indicatif. The second, passé composé. Number 3, futur proche. Number 4, impératif. Number 5, imparfait. Number 6, futur simple. Number 7, conditionnel présent. Number 8, plus que parfait. Number 9, passé et récent. Number 10, présent actuel. Number 11, subjonctif présent. Number 12, conditionnel passé. 13, futur antérieur. 14, subjonctif passé. And 15, passé simple. That's pretty much it. There are other tenses, but passé simple is the last one because it's used only in writing. So again, for instance, some of you, this is a conversation group, and I hope that most of you are looking for conversation, because this is the group, and I'm going to always talk about conversation, which includes reading and writing. But if you do want to have, so if you don't know other tenses, but you need passé simple to read books, well, do it like, earlier than the 15th, right? Let's say, for instance, futur antérieur, that's really important. So say, for instance, you really don't know that, but you do need passé simple, go for passé simple before. So, but this is the list that I recommend in order. And like I said before, go for one and then incorporate the second one, and then mix it up, stay comfortable. Then introduce the third one only when you're very comfortable. It takes time, but it doesn't take as much time if you work with me, because we are making conversation a very strategic way. And so the lessons of the intensive program are so including the previous ones, that it's no need for you to feel overwhelmed with any of this. So if you have any questions, I'd appreciate it. Any follow-up questions, please write into under the video here. And yeah, I loved this. Pretty much that's it. So thank you for watching. I'm looking for your follow-up questions. Stay on your game and don't ever give up on your dream to become bilingual. Learn to speak Parisian French and break your language barrier. Merci beaucoup et à demain. Au revoir.